Kick them when they're up, kick them when they're down, cook them when they're up, kick them all around. Welcome to the Silver Standard, folks. It is here where we air our dirty laundry on a weekly basis. Joined, as always, by the studio host for your Villanova men's basketball Wildcats, Mr. Ryan Lennox. My name is Matt Silver. Welcome inside. We've got a very, very big show, an important show, culturally and socially significant. But on a day when he's held to the fire before the Senate, perhaps we hold Philly's first-year manager, Gabe Kapler, to the fire here on the Silver Standard. Once 15 games over 500 and seemingly a shoo-in to be a playoff team, Lennox. If not a division winner, then certainly a wild card team, right? But this team has tanked. They've collapsed in an historic fashion. Move over, 1964 Phillies. Gene Mauch, you can rest easy now. Consider yourself off the hook. Gene Mauch's off the hook. There's a new standard for late season futility. I think Brett Brown and the Sixers are approaching a moment of reckoning here where they're going to sort of have to decide, what they want this season to be about. In a perfect world, it could be about both providing invaluable on-the-job training to Markelle and also about winning basketball games. But Lennox, I think in practice it looks like the Sixers are going to have to pick one. It is Thursday. The Eagles win over the Bears 4 long days ago, an eternity in the modern news cycle, and yet I'm still riding the euphoria of what they're calling the double doink. And by the double doink, I mean Cody Parkey's missed and or blocked field goal.
Not a missed field goal.
Although double doink does almost sound more like some very niche subgenre of pornography starring maybe even mimes or clowns.
No comment.
He's not the most talented, Nick Foles, but is there a cooler, more level-headed guy around? He's not afraid to lose. He's not afraid to fail. His faith is unshakable. He's a man operating with house money, and this makes him a very dangerous man for Sean Payton and the Saints. Would you agree, Lennox? We're going to put the Eagles conversation on hold. We're going to table it as they for a second while we welcome in our guest, Lacey Henderson, a Paralympian. I'm pretty sure the first Olympian to ever grace our presence here on the Silver Standard. And Lacey, you earned that prestigious designation, so congratulations to you.
Thank you. Thanks. Hey, I mean, it sounds like a big deal when I got an intro like that.
Absolutely. Welcome to the show.
I don't know if you've ever heard of Olympic fever, but Olympic fever is a real thing, and I learned it firsthand.
Is that something you can catch in the Olympic Village?
I think that's a virus instead. I'm just kidding. Maybe not.
And joining us now is beat writer for the Temple Owls. You can follow him at Philly.com, The Inquirer, and the Daily News, Mark Narducci. Mark, welcome back to the Silver Standard. I heard one of the commentators mention last night that there were NBA scouts in the crowd to watch Nate Pierre-Louis, and I was wondering, do you think Pierre-Louis has surpassed Quentin Rose as the Temple player that the NBA is currently most interested in?
That's a very, very good question. That's a very good question. Here's how I can answer that. Maybe. And the reason why is Quentin Rose has stuff that NBA people love. They love his athleticism, although as one coach told me, everyone has athleticism.
His measurables, am I right?
Yeah, they love his size. They like everything, but they don't like his shooting, and they're not crazy about his handle.
Which is kind of a funny thing. Which is kind of a funny thing. If I know it's more complicated than that. But it's you could almost translate. We love everything about him, except we just don't like the way he plays. And it is at this point that we introduce Paul Shirley. 9 years as a pro basketball player, 17 teams, both in the NBA and internationally. He's now a writer. He's been a writer, and now he is a podcaster, which is why we have him on this evening / early afternoon as he's calling from Los Angeles. So good afternoon, Paul, and welcome back to the Silver Standard.
Hey, I'm glad to be back. Feels like this is rare air.
You certainly you're in rarefied air. You and Frank Sinatra. When I read the book, when it came out, I didn't catch something that was just a pure gem, and it was that your mom taught sex ed to your middle school class It was something I missed, not something we touched on last time. And you tell a couple dating stories in the podcast that might be considered embarrassing, but I'd have to imagine that nothing could live up to the mortification of your mother talking about like the vas deferens in a room full of adolescent peers.
Yeah, it doesn't really get a lot worse than that. I'm going to Iowa in a couple of weeks to give a talk to some college students about student athletics or whatever. And I was thinking about breaking out that story because I think one of the things that sports teaches us is how to fail and how to deal with it. I think when my mom walked into that classroom, she was the county health department nurse charged with teaching sex ed all over Jefferson County, Kansas. And it was not only when she walked in, but then when she got out a condom and showed us how to use it. When I would tell the story years later, I'd always say, well, so my mom got out the condom and the banana. And she's like, no, Paul, that's not how it worked. And so I'd be like, I'm thinking in my head, I must have made this worse in my brain. And she said, no, I just used my whole forearm to put the condom on. And I was like, I actually made it better in my brain so that I could deal with it.
This is Matt Silver for the Silver Standard on 610 ESPN and 610ESPN.com. And I'm here today at the Verizon NFL Kickoff Extravaganza and sitting with newly minted Hall of Famer Brian Dawkins. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about some of the rule changes that are restrictive of defensive players and potentially especially restrictive to players who play your position, defensive backs. And this is a question I really am interested in. Could an NFL player today who plays exactly the way you played have a Hall of Fame career today?
No, because he would be suspended for too long. He would be suspended for games. He would be fined too much. He wouldn't be on the field enough. So there's no way that I could have played the way that I played when I played in today's NFL. I couldn't have done it. Now, I hear people saying, I would have been a Hall of Famer. Yes, I would have. Because when you are a professional, you learn how to do what you need to do in order to have success. And I consider myself to be a professional. I consider myself to be someone that can do what I need to do to have success.
Hold on a second, Ken. I think we are about to be joined by the legendary coach Bob Knight of Indiana University, formerly of Texas Tech and of Army as well. Coach Knight, thank you so much for joining us on the Silver Standard. We really appreciate it. I was reading something that was kind of interesting. John Chaney from an article a little bit earlier once called himself the Black Knight, the black version of you. And I just wanted you to expand on what your professional relationship with Coach Chaney. What was that like?
Well, I think John was really a rarity in coaching because he did everything in the most honest way, and he did everything that he could to help the players that he had, and he really, really knew the game of basketball. So when I look at a list of people, which I sometimes do, and this over those that I liked and those that I didn't like, when I start out with my little list on the coaches that I think were just outstanding, John Chaney was at the top of the list.
Tonight we have a real privilege. We are joined by Temple Hall of Famer Jay Norman, Hall of Fame player, 2 Final Fours for the Temple Owls in 1956 and 1958, over 1,000 points, over 1,000 rebounds, part of the select group of Temple Owls to achieve that. But if that weren't enough, he coached for 21 years under the legendary Harry Litwack, of course, a Hall of Famer, then under Don Casey, then under Hall of Famer John Chaney, coached legendary players, played with legendary players, Hal Lear, Guy Rogers, Pickles Kennedy, just to name a few, and coached some legends as well. We're going to take a trip down memory lane tonight, talk about all the greatness, all the history of Temple basketball, all through the Chaney years, and we're gonna reminisce, and we're gonna get nostalgic, and we're gonna talk about just how great the Big Five is, and what a treasure it is, what a treasure college basketball is to this community.
Guy was one of the the great passers. And guy had a mean streak. You know, Joey Goldenberg stole the ball off Guy once in practice, and Guy beat the crap out of him for the next 2 years.
Just so our listeners know, JT, drafted by the Saints out of UC Davis in 2002, went on to play professional football for a decade, played for several NFL clubs. We were talking about 2008 when you started half a season for the Niners. You played in the CFL at NFL Europe. One of only 2 D2 players, I think, to have ever gotten a vote in the Heisman Trophy balloting, which is impressive enough. But before the show today, I watched a little documentary that NFL Films did on you. It actually looked pretty recent. It's on YouTube. It's got like 50,000 views, and that's almost more than like at least a couple cat videos, I think. And the tagline for the short film is, "Find out why there's more to former starting quarterback JT O'Sullivan than meets the eye." So, JT, how much more is there to you than meets the eye? There's one particularly interesting cut on your website where you call the Philly special the greatest and gutsiest NFL play call ever. Briefly explain what you mean there.
I mean, I think it is the gutsiest play call. The greatest might be a stretch, and I'll be honest with you, I don't necessarily always write those headlines, but the gutsiest is absolutely the truth. I remember watching that live, and I got a chance to play with Doug Peterson in Green Bay. We were backup quarterbacks together, and I have a lot of respect for Doug and the way he goes about his approach to football. But that play was straight up crazy. I mean, I don't care how everybody knows how it went down on the sidelines with how the play was called and the suggestion from Foles, but the fact to pull that out in that time against that opponent, you know, if that doesn't work, you know, that stains your career forever. The first day of training camp, every year, they're going to ask you to hold. What you want to do is you want to fumble that first snap.
That's right.
You do not want to be the holder in Green Bay in December and January. Let me just put it out there. Do you know that I was in training camp with your boy Doug Peterson? When back in the day, when he probably his last year in the league with the Packers. Doug he was an interesting guy. He was Brett's basically best friend. Really good at stealing signs from across the field is what I remember. But he's a great dude, great storyteller, good old Southern boy. I can see why he got that team rallied towards a championship.
We're here on the Silver Standard talking with author David Richman. He's written a new memoir titled Wilt, Ike, and Me. It's about growing up, father-son relationship, family tragedy, and all of these things taking place in close proximity to the greatest athlete of that time period, Wilt Chamberlain.
I'm in 10th grade at Cheltenham High School. My father walks in and says, "I just traded for Wilt." And within a week, Wilt came. The opening practice, there were 600 people to see him. There were 7,000 for the first game. A few games later, the Celtics came. The next thing you know, we were in a championship city. And about 2 weeks later, I came home from school one day, and they're moving me out of my room. And I'm moved into the guest room, and my father moved Wilt into my room.
We're also joined by author and boxing commentator Christian Giudice, who's working on his 4th book, about which we'll get into greater detail later on in the hour, but it is a pleasure to have Chris here.
When you talk about, Don King, everything that he did during that time period was predicated on, and this is what I believe, on hurting fighters. And not only making money, but hurting these fighters where you just, their careers either ended or they were stagnated because of Don King.
Andrew Gunling from ESPN Radio in New York joining us. 888-728-9941 for the last few minutes here on the Silver Standard.
I can enjoy a little, lack of defense, and they'll give us a 140 to 130 game. I can live with that. But Silver, last year, what was the final score last year? What was it? It was like 190 to 170. I mean, it was insanity. Like, they have to do something to make the game at least 30% serious.
Brandon Apter, who joins us. Brandon's writings appearing this week on 97.3 ESPN.com. Always doing a wonderful job there. Brandon, welcome back to the show. That's right, folks. It's time for Michael Grippo and Get-a-Gripp here on the Silver Standard. We lead in with brand new fancy lead-in music from Aerosmith and the great Steven Tyler. And if that is not the red carpet that Michael Grippo deserves, well, then we've got no more recourse available to us. Grip, welcome back to the program. The bottom line here at the University of Tennessee is that this righteous moral indignation from volunteer fans was totally contrived as a pretext because the University of Tennessee tried to hire a football coach with a middling record, and they tried to hire him at a once mighty SEC university that has fallen on hard times and frankly has way too big of an opinion of itself. They are living back in 1998 when they last had any success. The NCAA loves to get up on its high horse and say, we support our student athletes in all of their endeavors, most notably the academic ones, and all our student athletes are going pro in something other than sports when they graduate. And all of these just moralistic commercials that I have to, grit my teeth through during the NCAA tournament. And yet, for 20 years, there was a systematic academic fraud at the University of North Carolina. Not a single banner has come down in the Dean Smith Center. Not a single national championship at North Carolina has been vacated. And what it communicates to me is that the NCAA is more concerned with an ejaculatory event than with 20 years of systematic academic fraud.
Well, just understand one thing. I don't have a desire anymore to talk about this or talk about that or really talk about anything.
Amazing the long leash that this guy got, and that's what took him down.
Well,
It's unbelievable.
You know what? It brings shades of Willie Mays Hayes. Black Hammer, White Lightning. Mine fell the hardest. Mine were the deadest. You remember that from Major League 2, Lennox?
Oh, of course.
Willie Mays Hayes and Jesse the Body Ventura. That's how I know you're both an expert and also a very sick man, because I truly fear anyone who sits down and watches the entire NHL draft.
I know.
He's either drunk or he's a schmuck. And he's never had a drink in his life, so
that's the process of elimination.
Let's go to Dave in Houston. That's going to do it for us on the Silver Standard. Thanks everyone for calling in. Thank you Andrew Gunling from ESPN in New York. Thank you KS for being with us. Thank you Ryan Lennox, the man behind the glass, as always, as he rolls his eyes. We will see you next week, and we are out.